In the small town of Eldridge, there lived a man named Ethan, who was known far and wide for his kindness. From dawn to dusk, Ethan was the person everyone turned to in times of need. If someone needed help repairing their roof, Ethan was there with a hammer. If a neighbor was sick, Ethan would cook meals and sit by their bedside. If a child cried because their toy was broken, Ethan would fix it, no matter how long it took. Ethan believed that kindness was the greatest virtue, and so he gave of himself freely, never asking for anything in return. He believed that the more kindness he gave, the more the world would become a better place. But as the days passed, something began to change. One autumn afternoon, as Ethan was busy helping an elderly woman gather firewood for the winter, his friend Caleb approached him. Caleb had known Ethan since childhood and admired his generous spirit. But lately, he had begun to worry. "Ethan," Caleb said, watching as Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, "you've been doing so much for others. Don't you think it's time you take a break? You look exhausted." Ethan smiled warmly, but his eyes betrayed a hint of weariness. "I'm fine, Caleb. Helping others gives me purpose. Besides, the town needs me." Caleb frowned. "But what about you? Who's taking care of you?" Ethan waved the question away, insisting that he didn't need help. But the truth was, he had started feeling the weight of his endless kindness. He hadn't noticed how much of himself he was giving away until it was almost too late. Days turned into weeks, and the requests for Ethan's help kept coming. People had grown so accustomed to his constant assistance that they stopped seeing him as a person with his own needs. He had become more of a convenience, someone to fix their problems without question. They didn't ask if he was tired or needed anything. They just assumed Ethan would always be there. One cold winter morning, Ethan awoke feeling heavier than usual, as though a great burden had settled on his chest. He sat up in bed and realized, for the first time, that he hadn't slept well in months. His body ached, and his mind was clouded with fatigue. Still, he got up and prepared for the day ahead. As he walked into town, he was immediately greeted by a long line of requests. A woman whose fence needed mending, a man whose wagon had broken down, a child asking him to fix a broken sled. Ethan wanted to help them all. He always did. But today, something inside him faltered. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, his voice barely audible. "I can't." The townspeople looked at him in surprise. Ethan, the one who never said no, was declining. They didn't understand. They thought him selfish, ungrateful even, after all the appreciation they had shown him over the years. Some of them began to murmur, disappointed that the man they relied on so heavily was suddenly unwilling to help. Ethan walked away, feeling their stares on his back. For the first time in his life, he felt like a failure. Not because he couldn't help, but because he realized how much he had neglected himself in his pursuit to be kind to everyone else. That evening, as he sat alone by the fire, Caleb came to visit him again. "I heard what happened in town," Caleb said softly, sitting beside him. "You did the right thing, Ethan." Ethan stared into the flames. "Did I? I've spent my whole life helping others, and now they think I've abandoned them. Have I been too kind? Is that even possible?" Caleb nodded slowly. "There's nothing wrong with kindness, but if you give too much of yourself without rest, without boundaries, it can become a burden. You can't pour from an empty cup, my friend. People have taken advantage of your kindness, not out of malice, but because they've forgotten that you're human too. You need to take care of yourself before you can truly help others." Ethan sighed, the weight of Caleb's words sinking in. He had always believed that kindness had no limits, but now he understood that even kindness needed balance. He had given so much of himself that he had forgotten to leave room for his own well-being. The next day, Ethan went back into town. But this time, when people approached him with requests, he didn't say yes to everyone. He helped where he could, but he also learned to say no when he needed to. Some people were upset at first, but gradually they began to respect his boundaries. They learned that Ethan's kindness was a gift, not an obligation. In time, Ethan's life regained balance. He was still the kind-hearted man the town loved, but he was also someone who had learned to value his own time, his own needs. He realized that true kindness wasn't about giving until there was nothing left. It was about giving thoughtfully, while still preserving enough for oneself. And in the end, the town learned something too. The greatest kindness Ethan ever showed them wasn't just his willingness to help, it was his ability to teach them that kindness.